She told me I wasn't good enough for her son. She called me a gold digger, a curse even stood between us and screamed, "Get out of my son's life." But what she didn't know was that the same woman she threw out was the reason her family was still standing. And when the truth came out, she collapsed right in front of everyone. The rain poured heavily that evening in Port Harcourt, washing the streets but not the pain in Ijeoma Nnadi's heart. She stood at the gate of her husband's family home, drenched from head to toe, her hands trembling as she held a small worn-out bag. Her eyes searched for mercy in the face of Madame Felicia Nnadi, her mother-in-law, but all she met was ice. The older woman's expression was sharp, her words colder than the rain itself. "You will not enter this house again," Madame Felicia shouted, her voice echoing through the compound. "My son made a mistake marrying you. You brought nothing but shame and bad luck to this family." Emeka, Ijeoma's husband, stood just behind his mother, his eyes darting between the two women. He opened his mouth as if to speak but said nothing. He simply stood there, silent, weak, and afraid to defy his mother. Ijeoma's heart broke again in that moment. She had endured insults, gossip, and humiliation from this woman for years, all in the name of love. She thought love was enough to protect her, to make her belong. But now, even love was standing in silence, watching her being thrown out like a stranger. The sky roared as thunder cracked above them. Neighbors peeked through their windows, whispering as the drama unfolded. Madame Felicia's voice cut through the air once more. "Go back to where you came from, Ijeoma. You will not ruin my son's life." Ijeoma swallowed hard, holding back tears that mixed with the rain dripping down her face. She looked at Emeka one last time, hoping, just hoping, he would take one step forward, say one word to stop this. But he didn't. He looked away, his head hanging low in shame. In that silence, Ijeoma's voice came out softly, but it carried a strength no one expected. "One day," she whispered, "you'll understand who truly loved this family." Then she turned around, her feet splashing through puddles as she walked into the storm. The gate slammed shut behind her with a loud metallic clang, a sound that marked not just the end of her marriage, but the beginning of a story no one saw coming. Years before the heartbreak at the gate, Ijeoma and Emeka's story had begun like a dream. They met at the University of Port Harcourt, two young souls who believed love could conquer everything. Emeka was from a comfortable, respected family, while Ijeoma came from a simple home. She worked long nights at a small restaurant to pay her tuition and often studied under the dim light of her phone. What she lacked in wealth, she made up for in determination and kindness. Emeka admired that. He used to tell her, "You have the kind of heart money can't buy." But love stories don't always please everyone. From the moment Madame Felicia heard about her son's girlfriend, her heart turned cold. "A girl who serves food to strangers? That's who you want to bring into this family," she hissed one evening. In her mind, a wife for her son should come from status, not struggle. She already had someone in mind, the daughter of a wealthy banker, someone she believed was more fitting for her only son. Still, Emeka stood by Ijeoma, insisting love was what mattered most. Against all odds, they got married in a small, beautiful ceremony filled with laughter, music, and hope. Ijeoma's family danced with joy, but Felicia barely smiled. She showed up, dressed elegantly, but her face carried disapproval the entire time. Even during the photos, she refused to stand close to Ijeoma. From that day, the battle began. Madame Felicia's tongue became sharper with every visit. "You're lucky my son has a good heart," she would say loudly at family gatherings, making sure everyone heard. Not every man would marry a charity case. Ijeoma would smile politely, swallowing her pain, pretending not to hear the cruel words. Emeka tried to protect her, but his mother's influence was strong. He loved Ijeoma deeply, but he was raised never to go against his mother's wishes. So when Felicia insulted his wife, he stayed silent, and that silence cut deeper than any insult ever could. Still, Ijeoma endured. She told herself that time and love would soften her mother-in-law's heart. Every prayer she whispered at night ended the same way. "God, please let her see that I love them, not for money but for family." She didn't know then that love alone would soon not be enough. When Emeka's business started to crumble, The world didn't see how hard Ijeoma worked behind closed doors to keep everything standing. What had once been a promising venture began to fall apart, little by little. Bad investments, unpaid suppliers, and mounting debts. But Ijeoma never complained. She quietly picked up her sewing machine and began working extra hours, stitching clothes late into the night just to keep food on the table. The sound of the machine became the heartbeat of their small apartment, steady, determined, full of hope. When Emeka came home looking defeated, she smiled softly and said, "Don't worry, my love. Things will turn around soon." But deep inside, she knew she was holding up the family with her bare hands. She sold her gold jewelry, the same ones her mother gave her on her wedding day, to pay off one of his biggest debts. When the landlord came knocking, she handed him cash she had secretly saved from her tailoring shop. She even helped Emeka's younger brother pay his school fees, never mentioning it to anyone. Every time there was a bill, she found a way to handle it. Every time Emeka's mother called asking for money, she made sure her husband never said no, because she quietly transferred the funds herself. She didn't want Emeka to feel like less of a man, and she didn't want his mother to look down on him. So she carried the weight in silence, believing that one day, love would make it worth it. But instead of gratitude, she faced more scorn. Madame Felicia would visit and sneer. "Look at how lazy you've made my son. You're draining him dry." In front of neighbors, she'd boast, "My son is suffering because he married that girl. She eats his money and gives him bad luck." Ijeoma would just bow her head, biting back tears. Even Emeka started believing some of the lies, slowly forgetting who was truly holding their world together. He never noticed the tired look in her eyes or the calluses on her hands from working too long. Still, Ijeoma didn't stop. She told herself, "If no one sees my sacrifices, God does." And night after night, as she sewed in the dim light, she whispered a promise, not of revenge but of faith that one day, truth would speak louder than all the lies. The lunch had started like every other Sunday, laughter, plates clinking, the smell of jollof rice filling the air. But beneath that false warmth, tension brewed like a storm ready to break. Ijeoma sat quietly beside her husband, trying to ignore the sharp glances Madame Felicia kept throwing her way. She had dressed modestly, spoken politely, even helped serve food, but nothing she did ever seemed good enough. Then, without warning, Madame Felicia stood up, her voice slicing through the chatter like a blade. "Ijeoma," she shouted, pointing a trembling finger, "you are a disgrace to this family. Leave my son's life today." The entire table went silent. Forks froze midair. Cousins looked away. Some gasped, others whispered. Ijeoma's hands trembled as her heart pounded painfully in her chest. She turned toward Emeka, her eyes pleading for him to say something, anything. But he couldn't even look at her. His head hung low, shame painted across his face. In that silence, Ijeoma felt something inside her break. Every sacrifice she had made, every night she worked to support him, every tear she hid behind a smile, all suddenly felt meaningless. Madame Felicia kept talking, her words cruel and sharp. "I warned you, Emeka. You married below your level. Look at her. No class, no family name, nothing to offer but poverty." The guests watched in stunned silence, afraid to speak, as if the scene before them was a play they couldn't stop watching. Ijeoma slowly stood up, her vision blurred by tears. She didn't shout back. She didn't defend herself. Her dignity spoke louder than any words could. She placed her napkin gently on the table, lifted her chin, and walked out of that room, the whispers following her like echoes of betrayal. Outside, the sun burned hot, but her heart felt cold. She walked away from that mansion, from that humiliation, with only one thought echoing in her mind. If love can't earn respect, success will. At that moment, she wiped her tears and made a silent promise to herself, to rise so high that even those who looked down on her would have no choice but to look up again. It was the day Ijeoma's heartbreak turned into her awakening. That night, Ijeoma packed her few belongings into a small suitcase. No noise, no drama, no goodbyes. The same house that once echoed with her laughter now felt like a stranger's home. She left quietly before dawn, the streets still asleep, her heart heavy but her spirit unbroken. She didn't look back. Every step she took away from that gate was a step toward her own freedom. Days turned into weeks, and Ijeoma began rebuilding her life from scratch. She rented a tiny one-room apartment, barely big enough for her sewing machine and a bed. But to her it was paradise, a place where no one insulted her, where peace didn't have to be begged for. She worked day and night, her fingers sore from stitching but her determination burning brighter than ever. At first, she took small tailoring jobs, mending school uniforms, sewing wrappers for market women, altering old dresses. But soon, people began to notice something special about her work. Her designs were fresh yet rooted in tradition, bold patterns that told African stories, simple cuts that flattered every woman. There was emotion in every thread she wove, every color she chose. Word spread fast. Boutique owners in Port Harcourt began calling her for custom pieces. Her name, Ijeoma, became a quiet whisper in the fashion world. Within a year, her small workshop transformed into a buzzing creative space, and her label Ije Designs was born. Her dresses appeared in fashion shows, her patterns in magazines, and her work on the streets worn by women who walked with pride. But despite her rising fame, Ijeoma stayed away from the spotlight. When journalists asked for interviews, she politely declined. When photographers wanted her picture, she smiled and said softly, "They don't need to know who I am, not yet." Because deep down she was waiting for the right moment. The moment when success would speak louder than her pain. When those who once humiliated her would see her name shining everywhere. She wasn't chasing revenge. She was chasing peace, dignity, and quiet triumph. And as the city of Port Harcourt buzzed with her growing success, Ijeoma watched from the shadows, calm, graceful, and unstoppable, sewing her way toward destiny. 2 years had passed, and the Nnadi family was preparing for a grand celebration. Madame Felicia was turning 60, and the event was the talk of Port Harcourt. The hall shimmered with gold and cream decorations. A live band played soft highlife music, and guests arrived in luxurious cars. Everyone was eager to honor the woman who once prided herself on being the pillar of her family. But behind all the glamour, things weren't as perfect as they looked. Emeka stood near the bar, quietly sipping his drink. He looked tired, worn out by years of bad investments and poor business decisions. The confident man who once carried his mother's approval like a crown now carried only regret. His clothes were neat, but his eyes told a story of loss of wealth, peace, and the woman who once silently saved him. As the party went on, Madame Felicia laughed loudly, greeting guests with pride. "My son will soon bounce back," she said to anyone who asked about Emeka's fading business. But then a murmur swept through the hall. The event manager announced that the main sponsor of the evening, the mysterious fashion entrepreneur who funded the entire party, had just arrived. The doors opened, heads turned, the music softened, and there she was. A woman in a stunning gold Ankara gown stepped into the room. Her poise was effortless, her smile calm yet commanding. The fabric shimmered under the chandeliers, the design uniquely crafted, one of her own creations. People whispered, trying to place her face. And then someone gasped, "Isn't that Ijeoma?" All eyes widened. Emeka froze, his glass slipping from his hand. Madame Felicia's laughter died in her throat. The woman she once threw out of her home now stood before her, not as a beggar, but as the powerful sponsor of her celebration. Ijeoma walked gracefully toward them, every step echoing strength and elegance. She didn't gloat or smirk. She simply said with a warm smile, "Happy birthday, Mama Felicia. I heard this family needed a little support." The hall fell silent. Cameras flashed. Whispers turned into applause. Ijeoma had returned, not for revenge but for revelation. And in that moment, everyone realized that the woman once dismissed as a charity case had become the name everyone wanted to know. The music stopped mid-beat as whispers rippled through the crowd. Every head turned toward the grand entrance, where Ijeoma stood glowing under the soft golden lights. The once unworthy daughter-in-law now commanded the entire hall's attention without saying a word. Her gold Ankara gown shimmered like royalty, her confidence unshaken, her smile calm yet powerful. A woman reborn from the ashes of humiliation. Madame Felicia's laughter faded. Her eyes widened, her lips parted, but no words came out. The woman she had thrown out like trash now stood as the honored guest. The one everyone was whispering about. The woman the whole city had come to admire. Cameras flashed wildly. Journalists whispered her name. That's her. The CEO of IG Designs. Then the MC stepped onto the stage, holding the microphone with a dramatic smile. His voice echoed through the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the woman behind tonight's sponsorship, the founder and creative director of IGE Designs, a company empowering over 200 women across Nigeria. Mrs. Ijeoma Nnadi. Gasps filled the room. Emeka froze where he stood, his mind spinning. His own name, Nnadi, now carried the success that Ijeoma had built, not him. The irony cut deep. The crowd erupted into applause, some out of respect, others out of shock. Even those who once mocked her now clapped like they had always believed in her. Madame Felicia's knees trembled as she gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. Her face turned pale, her pride dissolving faster than the ice melting in her untouched drink. Every word she had ever said, "You'll never be good enough. My son made a mistake," echoed back like thunder inside her head. Emeka couldn't breathe. He stared at Ijeoma as if seeing her for the first time. The same woman who once begged for a little respect now stood in front of hundreds, commanding it effortlessly. She looked his way briefly, her expression soft but distant. No anger, no revenge, just quiet strength. The camera zoomed in on Madame Felicia's face, capturing the very moment she realized the truth. The woman she had humiliated was now the one feeding families, employing women, and sponsoring her birthday celebration. And as the hall applauded louder, Ijeoma simply smiled, not to prove a point, but to show that grace will always speak louder than revenge. The hall erupted in thunderous applause, but amid the celebration, Madame Felicia suddenly went pale. Her eyes rolled back as her body swayed. The microphone slipped from her hand, and before anyone could react, she collapsed to the floor. Gasps spread through the hall, followed by chaos. Chairs scraping, voices shouting, cameras clicking. Emeka rushed forward, shouting for help, but his hands shook too much to do anything. Guests scattered, some calling her name, others just staring in shock. Through the noise and confusion, one figure moved swiftly and calmly. Ijeoma. The same woman Felicia had once thrown out now knelt beside her, her golden gown brushing the floor. She took Felicia's trembling hand and gently lifted her head onto her lap. Her voice was soft but steady. "Mama, breathe slowly. You'll be all right." Emeka watched silently, tears gathering in his eyes. It was a moment he would never forget. The woman his mother despised was now the one saving her. Ijeoma called for water and fanned Felicia with her own scarf, refusing to let panic take over. The crowd whispered, stunned by her composure. The cameras that once filmed drama were now capturing grace. After a few tense minutes, Felicia's eyes fluttered open. She blinked against the bright lights, confusion clouding her face. The first thing she saw was Ijeoma's face above her, calm, kind, full of concern. For a second, Felicia thought she was dreaming. Her lips trembled as she whispered, Why are you helping me?" Ijeoma smiled faintly, tears glistening in her eyes. "Because I never wanted to destroy you, Mama. I only wanted to be accepted. That's all I ever wanted." Felicia's chest rose and fell as reality hit her. The pride she once held so tightly was now gone. The woman she had humiliated, rejected, and insulted had shown her more love than anyone else ever had. Tears streamed down her wrinkled cheeks as she clutched Ijeoma's hand. Her voice broke as she whispered, "My daughter, you were the blessing I threw away." The hall fell silent. Even the music had stopped. All that remained was the sound of quiet sobbing and the soft hum of forgiveness filling the air. Ijeoma wiped Felicia's tears and helped her sit up, proving to everyone watching that true power doesn't come from revenge. It comes from grace. The white hospital walls carried a strange silence, the kind that holds both guilt and grace. Madame Felicia lay on the bed, pale and weak, tubes running from her hands. The woman who once commanded rooms with her voice could now barely whisper. But beside her bed, every morning and every night, sat Ijeoma. She brought flowers, home-cooked soup, and quiet prayers. She spoke gently to the nurses, thanked the doctors, and paid every single bill without anyone knowing. No camera, no reporter. Just quiet kindness from a woman who had once been cast out. When Emeka visited, he was stunned to see Ijeoma still there. She sat near the bed, reading softly from a devotional book. When he asked why she bothered after everything his mother did, she simply said, "Because bitterness heals nothing. Someone has to choose love." Her calm voice left him speechless. Days passed, then weeks. Slowly, Felicia began to recover. The first time she opened her eyes fully, she saw Ijeoma adjusting her blanket. For a long moment she just stared, tears forming. "You should hate me," she whispered weakly. Ijeoma smiled faintly. "I tried, Mama. But my heart doesn't work like that." Felicia turned her face away, ashamed of the woman she had been. When the doctors finally said she could go home, Ijeoma made sure everything was ready. A nurse, medications, even groceries stocked in the kitchen. She did all this quietly, never asking for thanks. But word began to spread through the family. Everyone was shocked. The same woman they had judged was now the one holding the family together. A week later, Felicia called a family meeting. The living room was full. Relatives, cousins, even Emeka sat nervously. She struggled to her feet, her voice trembling but strong. "I told her to get out of my son's life," she said, her eyes glistening. "Now, I'm the one begging her to stay in mine." The room went silent. Even the air felt still. Some of the family lowered their heads in shame. Emeka's eyes filled with tears. Ijeoma said nothing. She just smiled softly and reached for Felicia's hand. In that moment, the house that once echoed with pride now felt full of peace. It was redemption. Not loud, not forced, but real. Sunlight poured through the wide windows of IG Designs, painting golden streaks across colorful fabrics and busy sewing machines. The air was alive with laughter, the rhythmic hum of needles, and the soft sound of hope being stitched into every dress. Ijeoma walked slowly between the tables, her eyes filled with quiet pride as she watched the young women she had trained, many of them once struggling single mothers or girls who had dropped out of school. Each one now had purpose, skill, and dignity. She stopped beside a young tailor who looked frustrated and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Don't rush, my dear," she said with a warm smile. "Every masterpiece takes time." The girl smiled back, her eyes shining with respect. Ijeoma gathered everyone around and spoke softly, her voice calm but powerful. "Don't fight with bitterness," she said. "Build with grace. One day, even your enemies will celebrate you." The women nodded, some wiping quiet tears. They knew her story. They knew what she had endured, and what she had become. Just then the door opened. The room went still. In walked Madame Felicia, elegant in a flowing dress, one of Ijeoma's own designs. The same woman who once called her a curse now wore her creation with pride. Whispers spread among the workers, but Ijeoma only smiled and walked toward her. Felicia's eyes softened as she said quietly, "You've built something far greater than I ever imagined. I am proud of you, my daughter." Ijeoma held her hands gently. "Thank you, Mama. We all just need a little grace. That's what saved me." They stood there side by side, a symbol of forgiveness and rebirth. The camera slowly panned across the workshop, rows of vibrant fabrics, smiling faces, and dreams taking shape. The narrator's voice rose softly, wrapping the scene in warmth and wisdom. She was pushed out of her husband's life, but she walked into her destiny instead. When the world rejected her, she chose to rebuild, not with revenge but with grace. And in the end, even those who doubted her wore her name with pride. The final shot froze on Ijeoma's serene smile, the smile of a woman who turned pain into purpose and humiliation into honor. Her legacy wasn't just fashion. It was grace itself, stitched into every life she touched.